that album, Tender Prey, superb. I think it really set the pattern for the classic era, I think, of what the Bad Seeds were going to be. I think they really knew what they were doing at that stage.
For Tender Prey, it was kind of, the end of the Berlin, it was the Berlin era, it was the last of the super Berlin era of records. And although it was recorded in many different places.
I mean, Tender Prey was probably the messiest album.
Probably because Nick was at his most fucked at that point. Is that all right to say that? Of course it is. We're grown-ups now.
It was a very volatile time for a lot of people in a lot of people's lives. And it was more a lifestyle than it was really any kind of episode.
The result was Tender Prey was quite a patchy album. It's got his masterpiece on it, though. the Mercy Seat.
It's very exciting working on that song right from the outset. It was kind of clear that there was something special going on there. And it started in the typical way that some of these things do, just as a kind of loop that we made, that Nick wanted to do something over. Perhaps he already knew the lyrics that he wanted to sing over it, I'm not sure. And that he wanted to create this kind of really fast, kind of aggressive, kind of harsh loop thing just drilling at you.
And I remember that the assistant who was on the session, it was like pretty much his first session ever. As an assistant, and he'd been a T-boy, and I was going, come and work on this. This will really introduce you into how you can make music. And to this day, 20 odd years later, he still says how much his mind was blown about those sessions, because it was just the most bizarre juxtaposition of instruments playing together.
It sounded like it wasn't working at all, and I couldn't really figure out what was going on. I remember it quite well, and it was just very crowded control room, very crowded studio room, and Flood, with his kind of with his trademark kind of leather jacket, just kind of hunched over the mixing desk, just getting on with it,
I finished up doing the rough mix at the end of the night, and I know Daniel went off to mix it with Tony, and he said it spent him so long to be able to get to the same place as we had when we'd been doing the recording, because they hadn't been privy to part of the emotional journey that led to the balance of where everything was at the end of the rough mix.
Sometimes you just know when the track is beyond being something you love, but actually you know is going to be something important.
I don't know. Just as soon as it started taking any structural form, it was obviously going to be something quite special. It had a kind of special atmosphere, and then obviously the lyrics are quite exceptional.
I think lyrically, that's just, untoppable. It's just one of the most amazing lyrics I think I ever heard.
At the start of the song, the character says, "I am nearly wholly innocent." And then he spends the rest of the song claiming that he's not afraid to die and claiming there was no evidence against him and that he actually was innocent.
The lyrics really portrayed a feeling that was predominant in Berlin during those times. In 88, it was a very existentialist city. Everybody was wearing black, and everybody was always asking and questioning things, and nothing was taken for granted, and small talk was totally not called for. You really had to kind of prove yourself as a person who was thinking and asking and trying to see behind things. And the lyrics of the song, for some reason, they immediately got me because of that.
This song came about, for me, it came about when I was visiting Roland Wolf, who was at the time still a member.
Roland played it to me for the first time. I think he gave it to me on a tape.
It was totally mesmerizing, this kind of earth-shattering, earthquake-like thing that was coming out of the speakers.
It was really like an obsession of having to listen to this song over and over and over again.
Oh my God, I could listen to that every day. And it's there's a lot of songs like I think probably the most is probably his best song ever, because he really pounded it.
I mean, it's like, you know, listening to that record a lot. It's, yeah, again, Nick nails that song. You know, I've heard the Johnny Cash version, and I think it's good, but I think Nick really nails the character of the singer perfectly. You know, it's like a real. You hear Nick singing it, and it's like, you know, the singer's like a real lonely outlaw guy. You know, a real lonely character, and it's just Nick sound. Yeah, I don't know. It's if like if Nick was an actor, right? He's a singer, but if he was an actor, you would really believe him. You know, you would believe the look in his eyes.
He was reading a lot of books on, you know, mad killers like the Zodiac Killer or the Shoemaker is like maybe the maddest version, you know, of a killer who he had killed his own son with the help of the other son and stuff like that, you know, and had a really kind of frightening way to talk about his crimes.
The lyrics remind me a lot of Peter Carey's novel, The True History of the Kelly Gang. And I'm not sure if you read Nick Kelly's final letters, but that sort of ye olde, uneducated language that Nick Kelly used on his deathbed reminds me quite a bit of this character.
When I started singing his music, and say specifically Mercy Seat, which I first of all heard the kind of Johnny Cash version, which is a beautiful kind of slowed down version of it. When I did it, I thought, I'm gonna some people's hair is gonna turn white in this. But you get a lot of people who are like in their 70s goes, what is that Mercy Seat? I love it. And you see them rocking out to it. And I think, you know, if you're gonna do his songs, I mean, to do them justice for me personally is to try and get the words out and the message.
A ragged cup, a twisted mop, the face of Jesus in my seat, that's it.
One could talk really at length, you know, about the lyrical qualities, about the poetic qualities, about the poetic structure of this song.
There's half rhyme in that, cup, mop, soup. And then there's alliteration in there, the P sound that repeats over and over again. And it's a strange idea that you're hallucinating the face of Jesus in your soup. That's strange enough in itself. But what makes it even more beautiful is the fact that you've got this lovely, complex sound to the lines provided by the half rhyme, provided by alliteration.
As an element, you know, of synesthetic value, you know, I used words I put into, written words, you know, I put into the video to kind of, you know, direct the attention, you know, to the lyrics.
It's so menacing and sinister, but he gets your sympathy.
He almost kind of makes you, you know, side with the person who's in the mercy seat. And that's what he always does something with a song that takes a left to center look of life to make you go, is it, you know, is that political, or does he love religion, or does he agree with this person who committed murder?
It creates the mental state in a way that although the words do it as well, I think it's far more effectively done with the arrangement. And yeah, that's not there in the Cash version.
It's got that kind of amazing combination of being like a colossal wall of noise in a sort of Velvet Underground sense, but also it still has that kind of epic 60s country pop kind of thing that makes you think of Wichita Lineman, or by the time we get to Phoenix, those sort of epic, larger than life sort of pop songs.
It reminds me of Desolation Row, of Bob Dylan's Desolation Row, in form wise, you know, in this way to repeat or come to the same kind of line again.
As if it's mirroring the repetitive or obsessive thoughts that the narrator is having. And it's sort of building, you know, in the way that the electricity that's going to kill him would build, you know, or like a lobster in a pot that's being boiled alive. You know, it just comes to its boiling point.
You know, you really get a feel of this guy's, of this character's inner turmoil, whether he's actually innocent or guilty. In the end, he doesn't care. He's sick of the measuring of the truth. He just wants to end it all because he's sick to death of actually, you know, the looks of disbelief and weighing up the truth and what the jury might think.
And then in the end, of course, the last line is, but I guess I told a lie.
I think most of us think that, assume that he's actually admitting guilt at the last minute. He's only trying to talk himself into his innocence. But perhaps the lie that he told was that he is actually afraid to die. That at the last minute, that as brave and bold as he can claim to be, he is actually terrified of death.
I know that Nick sometimes used to say, you know, when I die, I can say I've rode the mercy seat. And so it must have been really important to him. And I believe it probably is, if I'm allowed to judge about that.
I think Nick told me about the phone call when Johnny Cash's producer, or maybe it was Johnny Cash, rang him up and said they wanted to cover that song.
Bruce Springsteen did one of my songs. So I remember the very first words out of my mouth were, man, now I could die. So a month or two later, somebody told me the story about Nick, that when he heard Johnny Cash was doing or had done one of his songs, you know what Nick said? Man, now I could die. We said the same thing unbeknownst to one another. Man. It was the same exact thing. And when somebody told me that, I laughed because I know what he was talking about, man, you know.
You know, I've seen him play the Mercy Seat with different arrangements over the years, and great, you know. Yeah, again, as a musician, I find that exciting that, you know, someone could do that with, you know, one of their best known songs, you know, just mess around with the arrangement, but, you know, make it as good as it ever was, if not better. You know, it's it just proves there's a great musical imagination at work, you know. It's very creative, and I don't know, it's kind of like, as I say, it's like, you know, it's about finding the soul of a song.
It's unbreakable. I think it's just a completely unbreakable. You know, I could sing it and it would sound good. And, you know, there's nothing I could sing that would sound good. I mean, really, nothing at all. But I think it's probably the one song that just even I couldn't damage because it's perfect.
If that album just had the Mercy Seat on it and the rest was, you know, you wouldn't even need the rest. That is just such a strong song, but it's got so many strong songs on it.
You know, the Mercy Seat's like one of the greatest songs ever, and so is Deanna. But in between those two, is that song Up Jump the Devil?
I was born on the day when my poor daddy died. When my poor mommy died, my daddy did a chick with a trunkman's wife. That's just, yes.
The kind of sliding, looping bass line that it fits perfectly with the idea of this evil devil with horns jumping around and causing all kinds of mischief.
Just the images that are conjured up remind me a lot of my father's village. This is a place where people believe that if you murder a man and you eat soup, the dead man's hand is going to come out of the soup and grab your face.
You almost can imagine a picture of that character or that song. Do you know, it's that vivid. And I think that comes from someone who knows how to really capture something and write something in a really evocative way. And that's why I feel he draws people into his songs, because he sets the scene.
You imagine the devil leading him down, you know, to hell, maybe through the mountains, like, you know, they're going down like miners into, you know, Dante's Inferno.
I think Heroin was the album before. I think this is the one where Satan was starting to get a look in.
When I bought this album, I was pretty much on smack. And I think you could hear also on the album that the whole scene was pretty much, the whole Berlin scene in this years was pretty much full of nightlife and trucks and bars.
One night, somehow, I was hanging out with my girlfriends one night, and they all listened to like The Cure, Smiths, Bauhaus, Depeche Mode. And we went to a all-ages sort of dance club, new wave kind of club night or something there. And I heard Deanna that night.
It's just a great love song, you know? It's like a violent love song, you know? It's like love is fucking violent. It's like Nick nailed it there, you know. Love is violent. Being in love is violent. It's, you know, it's a violent thing. And I think Diana's like a violent love song.
It's just such a crazed, joyful ode to crazed, joyful love, in a way, I guess. It's a very odd love song, but I always think of it as a love song.
I think you can call it a love song. It's very spiky and carnal. It's not one of the kind of slushy girl songs at all.
It has a certain gleeful naughtiness about it, smutty even. Yeah, I mean, he's one of the few people I know who can get away with quite a high level of smut and still come off smelling like roses.
Deanna's my shower song. Deanna's when you're getting ready for a night out and you're soaping up yourself and you're just going, Deanna, oh, Deanna, as you're getting ready. It's such a good example of Nick, that Nick would write a party song about thrill killers.
It was something about it stuck out, and I think the thing about it that stuck out were some of the lyrics, particularly "I'm down here for your soul," which to me was just kind of I was like, whoa. It was a lyric that I thought about in my head over and over again after I heard it.
Murder drives the Cadillac and death climbs in the back. I just love it. It's just the imagery in it, and it's just such a groovy song.
It's a classic Nick Cave and the Bad Seed song. It's a classic Australian song, and tells this wonderful story of, you know, this couple in Melbourne who are having all this fun, presumably almost killing each other along the way.
If there's one song that I'm always waiting to hear them play live, it's Deanna. I love it. I love it. It's of a kind of, it charts a kind of obsessive love, and I really appreciate stories that kind of have that sort of intensity to them.
I just wanted to know who the song was about. I don't know who the song's about, and with a lot of subsequent songs, we know who inspired them. We know who West Country Girl was about. We've got a good idea who inspired Nobody's Baby Now. We know My Dutiful Wife. We know who that's about. But Deanna, I'm sure people do know who it's about. I have no idea who it's about, and I just wanted to find out, who is she? This girl in Melbourne, who is she? She's inspired this classic.
I've never met Deanna, but she has a lot to answer for.
At that time, I was 18, I think, and not overly experienced with girls. Certainly not in a way of a girl who wanted me to play all these records about a guy that she just absolutely adored. That was kind of really weird.
I feel like Nick Cave fans aren't just like, yeah, I really like Nick Cave. You know, Nick Cave fans are Nick Cave fans.
She was my first case of a girl who was just a Nick Cave nut, and I seem to have come across a lot of them since.
I think we tend to be a little bit on the loopy side. I mean, if you're listening to lyrics like Nick Cave's lyrics and you're completely getting off on that, there's got to be something a little bit off in your head.
She wanted to be Deanna, and I remember that she going on about that song and going on about watching Alice, and which is such a beautiful song, but kind of gives me the fear a bit now.
I really tried to dissect that song because it had Alice in the name, and so of course I wanted to find something that was about me in it, and there was nothing. And it was, I think that's the only song by them that I really did that with, that really, you know, thought about the lyrics. And it's to me, it's such an interesting song. There's nothing like me in that song.
And it's not often you have direct literal associations with a Nick Cave song. You know, it's not often that you ejaculate skulls on people's dresses or, you know, murder 50 people in a bar.
But I did once, and it's a very significant point in my life, lie in bed watching Alice dressing. She was in my room, not her room. And there was a zipper on the side. But the uniform was her Boots, the chemist's uniform. So I wasn't quite in Humbert territory. But that played in my head for ages as a little personal desert island disc until I managed to get her again and marry her. So I think that lets me be a part-time pervert in the 80s.
Anyway, let's talk about Mercy.
There'd be lines in that song where I just think, wow, he is so good. Like in 3 or 4 words, he can take you to all these places. He's just such an amazing writer.
His voice in that song just conveys a kind of a lifetime in a sentence. Each sentence is going around, and it's like, it's really connects. And I think it connects to me is because I just feel that that one is a really authentic song for whatever reason. And words that come from the heart enter the heart. I mean, it helps in that song. He sounds like he's got a kind of a cathedral stuck in his throat, which I love. I love the delivery and the kind of yearning. And it has this kind of, well, a yearning, a kind of achingness to it, which is, and this kind of need for transcendence, which I love. And it's one of the things I love about that song and his work, that as a dandy, you should never, or as an artist, you should never, ever abandon yourself to the coarseness of reality. Reality must be transcended. And that song, to me, is transcendently romantic. And I find myself just getting swept away by it.
But so many tracks on that album are, I don't know, they just really pull you about this way and that, and they just really touch a nerve for me.
The music is always creating the kind of the tone or the atmosphere for the story that you're about to hear. And in my mind, there were always kind of like these little films that I was visualizing, and the music was the soundtrack.
Every time anybody would come to LA, they'd come and stay with us. So it was, I have some really stuff I forgot and Kid reminded me of. All of these dark, serious Germans would be coming through our house. And I'd always try to lighten it up. And I remember Roland Wolf and Mick Harvey were at the house, and Kid had left. And when Kid came home, I had the two of them wearing these long stripper wigs of mine, dancing to Delight in the living room. And Kid walks in, and he saw like the two of them just dancing around to Groove Is in the Heart with these wigs on. But Roland got so into it, he kept the wig on for the whole night.
I can't think of too many other examples of bands who've had to pull together so many different people from that many different walks of life, and they're able to make it work.
They've all been chosen and are all involved in this thing at all because they can bring something really individual to the work and to the whole situation. That's why they're there. I don't think any musician would survive very long in the Bad Seeds if they didn't have some, a lot of inner strength and a lot of individualized musical ability to bring to the situation.
I knew that Mick and Nick had asked me to be in the band because of my uniqueness, but because I was a very unconventional player.
Sort of sloppy, primitive, but totally precise guitar playing. Really was just so powerful to me at that time.
Because every time I play with do something new, it's slightly embarrassing because I don't play, I don't play like a regular guitar player plays. So I usually show up going like, okay, and then I have to kind of scratch around a little bit until I find what's going on.
Probably my favorite thing about Nick Cave is just the incredible guitar players that he's managed to to just sort of work with and you know, bring to my attention.
And I'm a big fan of Blixa Bargeld as well, you know, so it's like, I think he's he's an incredible guitar player.
I never thought of myself as a guitarist. I have, in fact, quite an developed aversion against the guitar. And so I always had to find ways in like how to treat that and how to do that so that I can live with it, and that I think it's tasteful and it's a good way to do it without doing the normal traps and the normal symbolism of it.
Nick was very trusting with the musicians, and so it was often like, okay, now Mick's done this, now it's your turn. Go do what you're going to do on this.
Well, one thing that does it for me is their ability to create a musical image that accompanies what the song is about. Like I think a great example is City of Refuge, where you have the repetitive line, you've got to run to the City of Refuge, you've got to run.
You better run to the City of Refuge. And it's just and still today, there's just one city in the world which you can call the City of Refuge.
Berlin is not a polite city. It was never a polite city. It was always a very blunt, a very harsh, very impolite, very tough city in a way, not financially, but one that would not let you get away with just an easy kind of, answer or attitude. And that's what I always liked about the Bad Seeds and Nick's lyrics.
Berlin became a bit of a sort of Melbourne destination, and I'd say entirely due to the fact that the Bad Seeds have sort of been there, and there was a sense that was a sort of Australian friendly city, and I ended up in Berlin for a little while, and it was sort of funny because a lot of the Germans or whoever French German people living in Berlin at the time, Nick and the Bad Seeds were their introduction to Australians, and Skippy, which is on German TV a lot.
Having never been to Berlin at the time that record came out, I had no frame of reference for the place, so everything was just this kind of product of my imagination. And I think that sleeve and those graphics and those songs kind of fueled that sort of naive, romantic vision.
It's the kind of quintessential for me, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds kind of look, feel.
I mean, just the typography, the black and the white and these big thick letters, and there's just something about that just says Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds to me. So it's like so much so that written any other way, it just looks wrong.
I still think it's really important to have a visual reference to attach to a record. I mean, if I see one more fucking line drawing of a bird on the cover of a record, I'm gonna puke. So I think when someone's brave enough to put their face on it and there's a good reason for it, it's really exciting.
For a photographer, which I probably am, Nick, in the 80s, Nick was incredibly frustrating because he had a very, very fixed idea of what he wanted to look like, but he didn't. He wasn't very good at looking like it. But he would stare levelly at you.
He's always photographed like a fucking undertaker, isn't he? Like that. He doesn't smile. Whereas you never see him smiling in photographs.
You could take the same photo 100 times, but you didn't like it. But that's what he had, this very immovable idea of what he wanted to look like, and you had to work around it. And that's what happened on Tend to Pray. That's one of the naughty ones where I didn't do what I was asked to do. But it works.
Yeah, it's so posed. It's so fantastic, but it's not vacant. It's not absent, And whenever I'm taking someone's pictures, I'm always, I feel protective of them, and I want to make sure that, that they feel comfortable posing, but that it's my responsibility to make sure that that pose has some depth to it if they're a little lost, And I don't really know how. I mean, that's something that you really work together with someone, especially a younger artist. But I imagine that no one really had to work with Nick Cave on his this image. It just seemed to, it just seems to come from his gut.
Nick has genuine charisma. Genuine charisma is very rare. Charisma is the ability to persuade without the use of logic. And it's a very, very rare quality. I mean, Elvis had it, Bono doesn't.
The one thing I will just go on and on about, and it's the one thing I've always thought, and no one's ever said it, is he is our Frank Sinatra. And I don't mean that in a really, like, trying to be, clever or anything. It's just when I see him on stage, he is to me, that's how I see it. I see him as Frank Sinatra, and it's as important to me as it was to the Mafia seeing Frank Sinatra, because it's just he speaks my language. He talks about the stuff I want to hear about, and he's got a phenomenal voice, and he's still skinny as well.
I guess in the 80s, especially, it was a really bad time for rock and roll music. There were if you did go and see gigs, people were quite static on stage. So to see somebody come out and, perform the way Nick did was pretty amazing.
They're a difficult band to tour, and it really was. I would work up a sweat mixing them. I mean, because everything was changing. There's so many dynamics, and one song would be really quiet and like a ballad, and the next song would just be really, loud, a Mercy Seat or something like that, and people would change instruments, or each instrument would have a different role in each song. So I was literally really working up a sweat doing it, where I'd see other mixers doing their live sound. They'd just sit there and touch the fader every now and then and have a beer and things like that, where I was just like, wow, I don't know how they do that, because I was hands on and flying around and having to try and catch up with what was going on.
When I see him live, it's just, to me, it's a miracle. And he's one of the few people I'll go to see live. I won't go to see anyone else live anymore because I'm 43. I don't feel the need to. But with him, when I have seen him live, it's just been fucking amazing. Each time, he's never let me down. Where I've seen Radiohead live and I thought they were shit. I've seen Coldplay live, I thought they were shit. Nick Cave is a live performer.
Around the time that we first met, Iain made me copious numbers of mixtapes. I mean, volumes and volumes of mixtapes. In fact, there was 7 that were made over the space of a week and a half, over the first Christmas that we were apart. And Slowly Goes the Night was on the first side of the first mixtape.
The opening line is just preposterous, and it's delivered in this kind of ridiculous kind of Cod Elvis sort of drawl that just, nobody was going to get away with. Under any circumstances, it just sounds ridiculous, but it also just sounds so perfect, so right for the record.
I just absolutely fell for him through this music, and I fell for Slowly Goes the Night in particular. This was like my song. This was a song that seemed to say so much to me, but I kind of thought it was by an artist of Elvis, maybe Elvis era.
I think in that period he was trying on a lot of different voices to see which one works. So you have that kind of Gene Pitney voice and then the Elvis Presley voice, and that one feels like the most richly parodic version of those crooner songs.
It's like a Burt Bacharach song. I was a bit, Nick Cave's done a Burt Bacharach here.
It's him, and I'm making fun a bit of the whole Nick Cave thing. I just find it a very, very funny song. There's a real mood and joke lightness about it that isn't really there in the other Nick Cave songs. And it's something that you find later in his music. But at that time, I mean, it's in the middle of Tender Prey, which is quite a serious, quite a downbeat album. And then suddenly there's this just ridiculous, hilarious song in the middle of it.
Another thing I love about Nick Cave's lyrics and the Bad Seed songs is how emotions become characters. So in a song like Sunday's Slave, which is about addiction, you have, the different days of the week becoming characters.
My favourite track, apart from the Mercy Seat, is Sugar, 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 because I just think it's so malevolent, evil, and you don't get that much seething dark psychosis in a track.
They kind of reprised the "You Better Run" to like "You Better Pray," you know. I love stuff like that when there's kind of this sort of theme that runs through a record.
I mean, the whole album, you can start at on Mercy Seat, and you finish with the last song, and you just can listen to it on repeat. I mean, this an historical statement, this album.
He couldn't have done another album like this. The next album would have been crap.
If you make a record, it's good to finish on something, and quite often, I mean, Nick seems to like, or the band seem to like putting a slower or a slow building dramatic number at the end. And that is, you know, you can start an album by punching people in the face, you know, hit them with a loud dramatic sound, but it's nice to leave on a sort of late night, last song of the evening, hey, you know, can you drink up your drinks now, please, kind of thing.
New Morning, the final track, is almost like someone's got up and opened the curtains and the sun's come beaming in, which is pointing the way to how it would be in the future, because Nick was going to enter into another phase.
I found that one particularly powerful, particularly as I was aware that personally he was possibly in need of some salvation. But that's irrelevant when you're considering a work of art. It's whether it means something to people who don't know anything about the personal circumstances of the artist. And I think, as cracked and fragile as that as the recording of that song is, it's totally convincing.
Sam Phillips at Sun Records used to say, you can say what you like about production or whatever, or multi-tracking. I don't care if they get 96 tracks. He said, I want a performer that can stand in the corner of that room and say, it may take me one take, it may take me 5 takes, it may take me all night, but, you know, I've got a performance in me and I can deliver something. I think what you're hearing on that album is superb songs and superb performances with no bullshit.
I go when no man before me bothered to go, till the soles of my shoes are shot full of holes, and it's all downhill with a bullet. This rambling and roving is taking its course. I'm grazing with the dinosaurs and the dear old horses, and the city streets crack and a great hole forces me down. My soapbox, my pulpit, the theater ceiling, the silver star spangled, and the coins in my pocket go jingle.